There are moments in life when heaven feels silent, when your prayers seem to rise into the air and disappear. You speak to God, but the room stays quiet. No answers, no signs, no comfort. Just stillness. And in that stillness, the questions begin to grow louder. God, where are you? Can't you hear me? Why won't you say something? You're not alone in that feeling. Throughout history, even the most faithful followers of God have faced seasons where they couldn't feel His presence. David cried out in Psalm 13, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a moment of honesty, a moment that reflects what so many of us carry quietly in our hearts. There's a deep kind of pain in silence, especially when it comes from the one you've trusted. You thought you'd feel Him by now. Thought the breakthrough would have come. Thought something would have changed. And yet, the storm keeps raging. The nights feel longer, and all you want is to hear a whisper from heaven. It's in this silence that doubt often takes root. You begin to question everything. Maybe I'm too broken. Maybe I've disappointed God. Maybe I've missed something. Maybe I'm not praying right. Maybe I'm not enough. But the silence of God is not the rejection of God, and His stillness is not absence. Sometimes His quietness is His most intimate invitation. We assume God speaks only in fire and thunder, but more often, He comes in a whisper, in a breath, in the waiting. When God seems silent, He is often closest. The silence you feel right now is not a void. It's a space being carved out inside you for something deeper, a place where trust is born, not because of what you feel, but because of what you choose to believe in spite of it. The silence may not give you answers, but it invites you into surrender. It's not about getting control. It's about giving it up, saying, "God, I don't hear you, but I'll still believe you're here. I don't feel you, but I won't stop speaking to you. I don't see the way, but I will keep walking." The silence is not a punishment. It is preparation. And while you wait, something is growing inside of you. A kind of faith that doesn't depend on feelings. A kind of love that isn't based on blessings. A kind of hope that doesn't fade in the dark.
Because even when heaven feels quiet, God is still moving. You see, we've been taught to associate God's presence with emotional highs, with tears during worship, or the chill that runs down your spine during prayer. But faith isn't built on feelings, it's built on truth. And the truth is, God has never left you, even when you feel like you're alone. Feelings are fragile. They shift with hunger, exhaustion, stress, or fear. But God's presence does not shift. His faithfulness isn't tied to how much you cry during prayer or how spiritually on fire you feel. It's anchored in who He is, unchanging, steady, patient. God doesn't speak to impress. He speaks to transform. And sometimes, the deepest transformation happens when He's quiet, when He lets you sit in the uncertainty, not because He wants you to suffer, but because He's teaching you how to stay even when you don't feel anything. Because that is real faith. Remember Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. The Son of God, fully divine and fully human, knelt in agony and said, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." And there was no booming voice from heaven, no angel choir, no sign, just silence. And yet, He stayed. He surrendered. And through that silence, the greatest redemption in history unfolded. So if you're wondering where God is right now, look at Jesus, not just in His glory, but in His silence, in His humanity, in His tears, in His surrender. He understands what it feels like to cry out and hear nothing back. And yet, he still trusted the Father. And that's what he's inviting you into. Not a shallow faith that depends on spiritual emotions, but a deep, enduring faith that knows, even in the silence, God is still God. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not too far gone. This season of silence is not your end. It is the beginning of something eternal. A love that endures when the music fades. A trust that stays rooted when the storm rages. A soul that says, even if I never hear another word, I will stay. I will believe. I will follow. That's the kind of faith that shakes the gates of hell. Some of the greatest moves of God begin in silence, not with noise, not with fireworks, but with stillness. Noah waited in silence for the rain. Joseph sat in prison with no explanation. Moses wandered the desert with no direction. And Jesus was silent before his accusers, walking toward the cross without protest. Silence, it turns out, is not the absence of God's work. It's often the soil where his greatest purposes are planted. When God is silent, he's not doing nothing. He's doing something you may not yet understand, something deeper, something that prepares you for what's ahead. But here's the challenge. Will you trust him when you can't trace him? Because real faith isn't tested when everything makes sense. Real faith is tested when nothing makes sense and you stay anyway. When God is silent, your obedience becomes louder. Every time you keep praying, even when it feels pointless. Every time you open the Bible, even when the words seem dry. Every time you worship, even when your heart feels numb. Heaven hears it louder than the loudest praise. And those moments, they change you. They deepen you. They build endurance that feelings never could. Because the enemy isn't afraid of a believer who only follows God when it feels good. He trembles when you follow God in the dark. This is why silence is sacred. Not because it's easy, but because it refines. It purifies your motives. It exposes your idols. It teaches you what it means to cling to God, not because of what he gives, but because of who he is. Many walk away when God is silent, but those who stay, they become unshakable, rooted, mature, not because they have all the answers, but because they've learned to wait in the unknown and still believe. If you're in that place right now, where your prayers feel unanswered and your heart feels dry, don't rush through it. Don't try to escape the silence. Stay with it. Let it do its work. Let it dig deep wells of faith in you. Because this is where the strongest faith is formed, in the dark, in the still, in the quiet. And when God does speak again, and he will, you'll be ready to carry what he gives. There's something God can give you in the silence that you'll never receive in the noise. Because it's in the quiet places where distractions fade, and your soul begins to truly listen, not just for answers, but for presence. And that's what your heart truly longs for. Not resolution, not explanation, but God himself. You've spent so long asking, why won't God speak to me? But maybe he's been speaking the whole time, in the waiting, in the discomfort, in the slow, stretching silence. Because silence, when it comes from God, isn't empty, it's intentional. It makes space for you to let go of your grip, to stop performing, and to simply be. God doesn't need your strength. He's not waiting for the perfect words. He's not impressed by flawless prayers. What he wants is your honesty, your raw, tired, unfiltered honesty. God, I feel alone. God, I don't understand. God, I want to trust you, but I'm struggling. That's where intimacy grows, not in your perfection, but in your surrender. And here's the secret. The silence doesn't change who God is, but it does reveal what you believe about Him. Do you believe He's still good when life isn't? Do you believe He still sees you, even when you feel unseen? Do you believe His promises still stand, even when the feelings are gone? This is what faith looks like, not a constant spiritual high, but a steady, quiet persistence. The decision to stay, the courage to hope when nothing changes, the trust to say, God, I'm not giving up on you, even when I don't feel you. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are being refined. And while it may seem like nothing is happening, the truth is your soul is growing roots, deep ones that won't be shaken when life gets loud again. And one day, you'll look back on this season and realize it wasn't wasted. It was the foundation for everything that came next. Because the people God uses the most are often the ones who walked through the longest silences and stayed. It's easy to think that spiritual progress only happens when you feel God strongly. But some of your greatest growth is happening right now, right in the middle of the silence. Not because you're seeing answers, but because you're choosing to stay. This is where real spiritual maturity is born. Not in the spotlight, not in the noise of applause, but in quiet rooms behind closed doors, where it's just you, your doubts, your whispered prayers, and a God who never leaves, even when He seems silent. He's not testing you to watch you fail. He's training you to walk by faith, not by sight. You're learning to believe without the need for signs. You're learning to listen, even when there's no sound. You're learning that faith isn't always a feeling, it's a choice. And here's the beautiful thing. Your presence in the silence is also God's presence with you. You wouldn't be still, you wouldn't be searching if His Spirit wasn't already drawing you. You're here because He called you to this moment. You're listening because He placed the hunger in your soul. He's not angry that you're struggling. He's not disappointed by your weakness. He's near to the brokenhearted, and your silent ache is a prayer He hears louder than any words you could say. In fact, the most honest prayer you'll ever pray might sound like nothing at all, just a breath, just a tear, just a still moment of staying. Because staying with God when you don't feel Him is one of the loudest declarations of love you'll ever make. And the enemy hates that, because you're no longer following God just for the comfort. You're following Him because He is worthy. No matter how you feel, you're becoming dangerous to darkness. Because a person who stays faithful in silence is someone the enemy cannot move. So don't stop showing up. Don't stop sitting in the stillness. God is forming a faith in you that will not be shaken. A heart that knows He's working, even when it seems like He's not. One day, when the silence lifts, you'll look back and realize this season didn't steal your faith. It gave you something deeper than you ever had before. Maybe you've been waiting for a moment, a breakthrough, a voice, a sign that God is still near. But here's what you need to hear. The silence has already been speaking. It's been shaping you, molding you, teaching you the kind of faith that doesn't need fireworks to survive. Because God doesn't only move in miracles, He moves in stillness. He moves in quiet trust, in surrendered hearts, in the ones who say, even if I don't feel it, I will follow you. And that's you. You didn't walk away. You didn't shut down. You're still here, still searching, still believing. And that means more than you know. You're learning something sacred. How to love God not for what He does, but for who He is. That's the kind of love that lasts. That's the kind of faith that grows deep roots. That's the kind of relationship God desires, not built on perfect feelings, but on persistent trust. He sees your heart, the questions, the silence, the ache, and He is not far. He never was. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not failing. You are being strengthened. And one day, your story, yes, this quiet chapter that feels so hidden, will become someone else's reminder that God is still good, even in the silence. That God still speaks, even when the room feels empty. That faith doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply breathes. I'm still here. And heaven hears that. So today, if the silence still lingers, don't rush through it. Don't panic. Let it be what it is, a space where God is building something unshakable inside you. Let it remind you that you were never alone, that He was closer than you thought, that even in the quiet, He was whispering, I love you. I'm not leaving, and I'm still in control. So rest, not in what you feel, but in what you know. The silence won't last forever, but what God is doing in it just might.